Really, the first full weekend of play in the SEC with 6 games and 12 teams going at it. We've got Will Gunter on the line from 107.5 in Columbia, the all-new early game to help us sort out the Georgia Bulldogs and South Carolina, with the Gamecocks hosting the game there in Columbia. Will, before we get to that, of course, the weather could play into this thing. What is the latest in regards to the storm headed up your way and how that could affect the game and the timing as it plays out right now?
Well, as far as Columbia right now, not a whole lot expected here. Maybe an inch or two, maybe 3 or 4 inches of rain, maybe a little bit of wind. But in terms of Columbia, South Carolina, we're kind of out of the path, or at least we are as of this morning, as of Thursday morning. We're in a safe zone. Actually, the last forecast I saw, we were actually what they call the cone of the hurricane. We've learned a lot. I've learned a lot this week on hurricanes and how to be a meteorologist around here. But we are out of the cone of the hurricane. So Columbia is fine. You might have a game that's going to be played in some rain, maybe in a little bit of wind. Depending on when they play it, we'll find out later this afternoon whether it'll be 7:30 on Saturday night as scheduled, or it'll be Sunday, worst case Monday night. It will be played here in Columbia. They made that announcement last night, but it's a matter of when. Sunday at 1 o'clock has been bounced around. Maybe Monday night, worst case. Georgia does play Vanderbilt next week. It is in Athens. If you have to pick an opponent that's an SEC school to play on a short week, probably Vanderbilt. But the Bulldogs have a game next week. South Carolina has a bye week, so maybe Sunday night. But we'll have an announcement later today. The reason that there's a kind of a holdup after what I just said about the weather is law enforcement and handling traffic of everybody coming in. You have 80,000 people that are expected to attend the game, maybe another 20,000 that come to just tailgate and enjoy the party. So a lot of things going on that are outside of the storm itself that involve police and trying to make sure everybody evacuates the coast properly.
All right, so if Mark Rogers TV ever transitions from college football into weather and we need some meteorologists, you're on the short list now, Will. I was
Good.
mighty impressed.
It's been a long week. It's only Thursday. Yesterday's show was exhausting trying to talk weather.
All right, we'll not exhaust you anymore because I don't know that I have any other weather questions besides how's this going to impact the game. When we talk quarterbacks, that's going to have an impact on the game and Will Muschamp's approach in playing these two quarterbacks. And I know that's been a topic of discussion for you and the fans there at South Carolina for the entirety of the week. So Brandon McElwain, of course, wrestled it away from Perry Orth for a few weeks, even though Orth was the guy that won game one and seemed to be the more effective quarterback because of obviously what McElwain can do with his legs. He brings that dynamic. Then Orth seems to have played a little bit better ball game against Texas A&M. So where do we stand now?
It's a good question. They'll both play on Saturday night. They'll both play, or Sunday, whenever we play. What you're looking for here right now is who gives you more of a passing threat. Brandon McElwain, the interesting stat on Saturday against Texas A&M, through one quarter and one play, through the first quarter and the first play of the second quarter, was 5 of 7 for 36 yards. Over the second and third quarter, he was then 4 of 8 for -2 yards. So, you kind of take that there seemed to be some improvement. And then things kind of went backwards. Perry Orth comes in the fourth quarter and is 11 of 18 for 138 yards. And all of a sudden you think, boy, starting to find a little bit of a passing game. South Carolina not very good in the passing game, both nationally and in the SEC. So they're trying to find something there. Brandon McElwain, I think everybody's got to remember at the end of the day, still only played about 15 quarters of football. He's learning. I mean, this is not something that, how many other freshmen do you see? Jacob Eason is struggling around the country. Jalen Hurts is in a different position with a lot of talent. Not a whole lot of other freshmen you're seeing specifically across the country they're coming in as quarterbacks. Brandon McElwain's done okay. Hadn't been great. Hadn't been awful. Maybe the biggest surprise is the athleticism and beating you with his legs is what we haven't seen. So maybe you go back. Personally, I think based on past history, and I know this is a quicker segment, Mark, and I don't want to kill all your time, but Perry Orth has been in the past very good coming off the bench, going back to last year, maybe seeing the game, allowing it to develop a little bit. Maybe that's because defenses have changed their strategy when he comes in. Maybe that's because the Gamecocks have been down 2 touchdowns. But there's a history so far of Perry Orth dating back to last year coming in off the bench and being pretty good. I would go with McElwain to start and then bring in Perry Orth. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think they're going to go with Perry Orth to find a passing game right off the bat.
Well, I'm not a real smart guy, but I'm figuring that if you complete 4 passes and you're at -2 yards, then maybe you should stop completing the passes because you're going in the wrong direction. But anyway, that brings us to Rico Dowdle's contribution last week. Much acclaim throughout the offseason in regards to what he could contribute to this team. And he finally got on the field, got some attempts, and showed us some things.
That's a fascinating guy for a South Carolina fan. Here's a guy, a recruit, who actually played. He'd been a running back at AC Reynolds High School in Asheville, and his senior year, because of a lack of a quarterback, they had to move him to quarterback, and they essentially snapped it to him every play and let him run the football. And he ended up putting up monster numbers and was a parade All-American. And he is originally from the state of South Carolina, wanted to come to South Carolina. So when Bobby Bentley and the staff offered him, he was pretty ready to commit, and was a guy that South Carolina fans thought could come in and make an impact. And last week, he finally was healthy. He's had a sports hernia injury, basically dating back to the beginning of July. Didn't go through July workouts, didn't go through fall camp, finally was healthy, went through some practices, and gets in last week. And he showed a burst of speed, but more importantly, he showed a guy who could run through arm tackles at the line of scrimmage. I mean, you know this, in today's game of college football, you don't always have a wide open lane to run right through. You've got to be able to break a tackle or two. A.J. Turner's been a good back. He had a 75-yard carry last week on the opening play, running to the perimeter. But South Carolina wants to run the ball between the tackles, and Rico Dowdle showed maybe the ability last week to be a guy who can go in there, take a hit, keep moving, and pick up 4 or 5 yards.
All right. Well, as you can imagine, and you hear response from around the SEC as much, if not more, than I do. But when I talk to other SEC folks, whether they're bloggers, broadcasters, and the like, when South Carolina is referenced, the offense comes up, and it's generally considered, man, there's just nothing there. Well, that's not exactly the case. And when you don't have Brian Edwards and Deebo Samuel, the offense is going to take a huge hit. So they seem to be ready to go this week.
The expectation as of today, as of Thursday morning, is that both guys will be healthy and both guys will play this week. And obviously, them being out along with Randrakus Davis or Dreek Davis last week was a detriment to the passing game. It really took away the opportunity to throw the long ball early in the game. They were able to hit some late with Perry Orth, but that was obviously a detriment. They're also missing 2 offensive linemen. One of them, Blake Camper, a tackle, could be back this week. They said he was available last week, so you would assume he's back this week. Donnell Stanley, who started the opening game and played about 10 plays, 8 plays before he sprained an ankle, has also been out. You've got a young offense. Obviously, we talked about Edwards. He's a freshman. McElwain's a freshman. A.J. Turner's a redshirt freshman. Rico Dowdle's a freshman. Dreek Davis is a freshman. Then you start adding injuries. It's been a lot of growing pains for this offense. Getting healthy is the key, getting those guys back, and then really developing some chemistry. So, there's a lot to this offense that I think more than just lack of experience.
So Georgia comes in at 3-2. The Bulldogs, of course, lost in about as excruciating a fashion as you can imagine last week against Tennessee. But at the same time, they squeaked by on a 4th down conversion against Missouri. They got by Nicholls State 28-26. So they're probably right about where they should be at this point. Jacob Eason, aforementioned, 54% passer. He's thrown 4 picks. So we see the flashes from him. He's got great talent, but there's an adjustment. What surprises me about this team to date, we knew that there might be issues along the offensive and defensive lines, but when you've got a Sony Michel and Nick Chubb, you would expect to have a dominant running game and to see big plays on the ground, and they just haven't had it. They've been decent on the ground, but not the dominant Georgia rushing attack that we've seen in recent years.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Georgia, I'm with you. Now, Nick Chubb had that game. After that, 80 yards on 20 carries against Nicholls. He wasn't very effective against Missouri. Obviously got hurt in the Mississippi game and played 1 snap last week. Yeah, I think that fits into what South Carolina would like to do defensively this week. You're right. They have been playing better. Statistically, South Carolina is a very strange defense in that they're 12th in the league, in the SEC, 12th, which is not good, in rushing yards allowed. but they're third in passing yards allowed. They've done a good job against the pass. So to me, and even those rushing yards are not as bad as it seems. They've given up some carries. Nick Fitzgerald, you and I have talked about that going back to the Mississippi State game. That was the one that kind of set them back, where they gave up a lot of yards, especially in the first half. So you're right. The way Georgia comes in, probably about where we thought they would be. I didn't expect them to get blown out the way they were in Ole Miss. Tennessee, depending on your feeling of Butch Jones and what they were going to do this year, maybe you picked Georgia to lose that one, maybe you didn't. So with a freshman quarterback, I do agree they're about maybe where we thought they would be.
Isaiah McKenzie's their big play guy. Uh, Offensively in the passing game, he's got 4 touchdown receptions and is really getting the yardage chunk plays downfield. Defensively, maybe Georgia's not quite what they've been in the past. They really were ravaged in the secondary by Ole Miss, and I think that I'm going to attribute that to the lack of a pass rush, because this Georgia secondary is one of the best in the nation. Typically has been with Dominic Sanders and Quincy Mauger in recent years. So, what kind of shot do you give the Gamecocks? So, what's your formula for an upset win?
Well, it's game 6 at this point. Nothing. I would be shocked if South Carolina comes out and is able to effectively move the football through the air, probably on the ground. I mean, what this comes down to is your typical Georgia South Carolina slugfest. We've seen some differences in the past. 2 years ago here in Columbia, it was 38-35. That was kind of different than what we've seen. Last year was obviously, for South Carolina, stunk, and Grayson Lambert set all kinds of records. Who, by the way, just for the record, Grayson Lambert still 20 straight completions. He has not thrown an incompletion against South Carolina since I think like the second quarter. So if Georgia wants to throw him out there, maybe not a bad idea. He's already got 20 straight. Let him just keep going, see how many he can go for. It won't happen. I think Carolina fans would like to see it. But you slow down Nick Chubb. You turn this into a low-scoring, physical, defensive-style game where mistakes become at a premium. South Carolina's been pretty good at forcing turnovers all of a sudden of late. They've done a good job of affecting Trevor Knight last week, of forcing a fumble, getting an interception, and they dropped a couple more. Now you get a freshman in what should be a night game environment at Williams-Brice. Should be a lot of fun. I think that's how you see if you can force a turnover, you limit the run game. And then offensively, South Carolina's got to find a way to generate something. They're not going to transition from the worst offense in the country. I think they're 127 out of 128. It's not going to happen. They're not going to show up and put up 40 points on Georgia. You have to manufacture points. In the return game, they ran a punt back 2 weeks ago against Kentucky that was called back because of a block in the back. They ran a kickoff back almost to about the 20 against East Carolina. You've got to manufacture points somehow through whether your defense forcing a turnover or special teams to give yourself a chance offensively, put enough points on the board to win.
All right, so it's not the game that will decide the SEC Eastern Division like it was a few years ago for a string of seasons, but it's certainly a very important game for the fan bases and for the building blocks for these 2 first-year head coaches. Will Gunter from the all-new early game there in Columbia, South Carolina at 107.5, breaking down Georgia and South Carolina. Will, we always appreciate the conversation.
Always enjoy it. Should be a fun weekend, a lot of good games, and hopefully we'll get this one. It'll be played in Columbia. It's just a matter of when.